All right, it is 6:35. I'm going to call us to order. Per usual, we will record our meeting so that if ever anyone wanted to go back who missed the meeting, they'll be able to look at the 2-hour Zoom video of the Ward 7 Education Council meeting from February. But I'll go ahead and call us to order. My name is Ebony Rose Thompson. I am the chair of the Ward 7 Education Council, and I want to make sure that our board members who are on the line introduce themselves.
Hi, this is Nzinga. I'm eating, so I'm going to stay off camera, but nice to see everybody else.
Hi, Laura Fuchs. I'm the recording secretary, and I'm also a teacher at HD Woodson.
Greg didn't hear my instructions because he's in the waiting room. But Greg Rhett is our membership chair, and he's also on the line. So we have a few things on the agenda for today. I'll share my screen if that's helpful. About my shared screen. So we have a few things on the agenda for today. We're going to call to order. We'll make sure we do the minutes and our business and stuff first. And then we have two guests, one of who is already with us, Qubillah Huddleston from the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. And then we'll be joined by Councilmember Gray, who largely shared with us some vaccine updates, but also feel free to ask some questions about other things. So I'm going to turn it over to Laura because she is our recording secretary and can update us on the minutes from last meeting. Do I have to give you permission?
Possibly. Every time I've tried to drop them in the chat, it has ended in failure. And unfortunately for all of you, my version of minutes tend to be extra detailed. Okay. I think, yeah, I apologize. I messed up something with the.
Now she has.
Oh, here it is. I guess just we had guest speakers, Christina Henderson. And there were many questions put to her by the members. Just, I don't know, because the Yahoo group's gone, I guess I don't know how we're getting these out to people who want them. I don't know if it's just they email and ask or.
This issue a little bit more like that.
And whom should we email to put in a request for a copy of the minutes?
So we'll send, we typically send it to the email list. If not, I will also put in the chat our address and you can email the address to get a copy of the minutes if you're not on that list. I hope that when you ask, if you're not already on that list, ask to be added to our email list because like everybody else, the Yahoo group is gone.
And so that was really the bulk of the meeting was the meeting was the Q&A.
Yeah, I don't think we've voted on anything. So we'll send the minutes out so people can actually like read them if they would like, but we didn't vote on anything last meeting. So a couple of the other two things as far as business go, we are supposed to have elections in April. I believe so it used to be that we had to have elections in April. Now we actually have the options of having elections in April or May because our elections already always fall during budget season, which is not terribly convenient. But we'll have elections of April this year for us. I believe that meeting falls on April 1st. We did decide that since we did not have elections this past spring, and we typically have elections every year, but our terms are 2 years for the Education Council. And we'll share the actual list out of like what'll be 1 year, what'll be 2 year. That we'll still do elections for all the seats because we know how to do that now, and nobody planned on us still being in a pandemic at this point. But we'll do elections for all the seats, but to keep us on our staggered schedule, some of the positions will be 1 year, some of the positions will be 2 years. We do have, per our bylaws, we have to appoint, well, I have to appoint a nominations committee prior to the elections. It's a full 8 weeks before the elections, which is today, in which I have done. We have to have 3 to 5 people on our nominations committee. The nominations committee cannot be anyone on the executive board. But in theory, but it does not prevent someone from running from an executive position per our bylaws. Our 3 people, and I'm waiting to hear one back. I have to have 3, but I can have up to 5. The 3 people who will be serving on the nominations committee are Allison Kerner Brown, who volunteered at our last meeting and served previously, so she knows what she's doing. Delia Housel, who is a parent, but she's also the chair of 7E. She's volunteered to participate. And Charles Boston, who lives in 7B. Some of you may know him because he ran for the Ward 7 State Board seat, but he's agreed to participate, and he's also a Ward 7 parent. I'm waiting for possibly one more confirmation, but those are at least your 3. You will hear from the nominations committee at our next meeting, they will report out the exact procedures for elections. They will also share, they'll share the procedures for elections. They'll share information about which positions, like that staggering that we talk about, and they'll give a full report. And so that way people will have a month to consider their nominations. We will also share as a follow-up to this meeting how you get in touch with the nominations committee. People can nominate themselves, or you can nominate another person. If you nominate another person, that person, of course, has to accept the nominations committee. It has to accept the nomination, and the nominations committee will handle all of that. We keep a Chinese wall, if you will, between the exec board and the nominations committee. So once that information is shared out as far as how to contact them, any requests having to do with nominations or elections should go to the nominations committee and not the executive board. I will stop talking for a moment and see if anyone has any questions about that. All right, hearing none and seeing none in the chat, I'm going to move us along. Our first guest is here, so I'm sure you can hear from her and not from me. But Qubillah is awesome. Qubillah Huddleston is an analyst with the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. She is someone we've worked with as a board and as an organization through the Coalition for Community Schools. Are there stipulations to be nominated? There are no stipulations to be nominated. There are no stipulations to be nominated. Are there other questions before I turn it over to Qubillah? I don't want to put her on the hook for those things. All right, going once.
No, that was it, but thank you.
Okay, no, but I just, in case there was somebody else who was late to the chat. All right, awesome. So Qubillah, I'm going to turn it over to her. She has some information to share just about the budget process. As people know, this is our first COVID budget. It's not, so there are some things that are different as far as things people might need, and we will leave some space to talk about priorities that people have. But it's also the first budget we've had in a while without an ed committee. So if people have questions about that, Qubillah is a great person, great resource. She's super knowledgeable, and we're happy to have her here. So Qubillah, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ebony Rose. And just so I can be mindful about how much time do we have for this conversation before the council member joins us?
The council member is going to join us. It's going to be after 7. It'll probably be around 7:15 or 7:20 or so.
Okay.
But he probably also would like to hear some of this conversation. So we want to make sure we leave time for questions. It is helpful to me as a facilitator if people put questions in the chat for 2 reasons. One, because if there are things we need to follow up with, we can very easily export the chat and make sure we get them answered. 2 is because if you kind of have a question while Qubillah is talking, we can kind of keep a queue instead of like when we're in the room and I give people numbers. It's much easier if I can look at the chat and make sure we're fair as far as kind of first come, first serve. But Qubillah, I'll turn it over to you. I'm gonna make you a co-host.
Thank you. So I'm well, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Qubillah Huddleston. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an education policy analyst at DCFPI, but I have been dabbling in many other things too. I've been with DCFPI almost 2 years. I've never not worked in a pandemic budget season. So I consider myself a pandemic budget expert at this point. I want to start out by talking about the budget process, sort of where we're at, and I'm going to share a few slides for that. And then I want to come back and talk about, what Ebony Rose mentioned, what does it mean for us to not have a committee on education, as well as sort of talk about what DCFPI's priorities are. And I would really love for that the second half of it to be more conversational, just so I can get a better sense of, the things that are on your mind. So I'm going to share my screen. I have like a double monitor now, so I don't know if it's working. There we go. Okay. So I'm like figuring things out. Okay. You all can see this? Okay, great. So in terms of where we're at, the mayor's budget team and the agency heads are in the process of finalizing their budget plans. They're thinking about the district's revenues, which I can also get into a little bit later about, our overall financial picture. They're also thinking about how the December federal relief that was passed by Congress is going to factor into how they allocate our local funding as well as the federal funding. So they're really trying to just like fine tune all of those different things, as well as the council is, getting ready to host performance oversight hearings. I believe the Department of Behavioral Health is the first one, which is next Friday. I will be testifying at that. I hope other people are going to be testifying about that. As you all know, the district is facing a major mental health crisis, especially for our young people, and we need to make sure that they have, adequate mental health resources. But that is, a process. The performance oversight process is really an opportunity for the public to comment on what has worked well in the last year, but it's also an opportunity. It's an opportunity to talk about what has worked well, but also what hasn't worked well, right? And then it's also an opportunity, though, to also talk about what is needed for the upcoming year. We do have budget hearings separate from performance oversight hearings, but honestly, because the mayor's budget comes out in March, at the end of March, we should be commenting on what is needed at the performance oversight process. I don't know what just happened. I think subtitles, I'm sorry, I don't know how to turn them off. Hopefully they're not distracting. But yes, so performance oversight hearings are super important, super critical to just comment on the performance of an agency. So like for education, right, it would be really important to talk about the support or lack thereof that DCPS provided students and families, the charters as well, talk about OSSE and the role that it's played and, making sure children are learning what they're supposed to be learning. It's just a really great opportunity for the council, honestly, to hear from you all about what's not working or what is working. In February, the mayor is going to also host some budget engagement forums. The first one is next Wednesday. That one is for seniors only, but then the following weeks, they're open to the public. So I'll be there for the February 16th one. I hope to see some of you all there. I believe Ebony, Rosa, and Zinga, you all have shared how to sign up for that, so I don't need to tell you all that. But again, that's another opportunity to talk about what's important. Budgets are moral documents, and what we fund is what we value. So it's really an opportunity for the public, for residents, advocates, all of us to let the mayor know, like, hey, these are the things we want to see happen in our city budget. And then the long-awaited moment is March 31st. Hopefully, there are no extensions of the public health emergency and we don't get a pushback like we did last year. And her budget will come out, her proposed budget will come out. And then we'll have budget oversight hearings, and I have like relevant dates to this group in the next slide, but there'll be budget oversight hearings. And then the last hearing on the big budget, so everything that's in the budget, education, health, transportation, public safety, is on May 7th. There'll be a markup period where the council, each committees will mark up the budgets. They may, move money around a little bit during that process. They may make other changes. The council will vote on the budget in late May, early June, and then DC has to have its budget reviewed by Congress, and then it becomes law. So just some key dates for you all. As I mentioned, the budget engagement forums, the public oversight hearing for everything education is Tuesday, March 9th. That's 2 days before my 30th birthday. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm ready to go because I'll be like ready to celebrate, right? And then in terms of budget hearing dates, the education hearing date is Thursday, April 22nd. And then the big budget hearing date is May 7th. These all are tentative. I've even noticed that some dates have already been changed. So I did include a link, which in Zynga, I can send you this presentation and then you can mail it out to everyone so that they can know how to access the full schedules. But just keep in mind that these are tentative, but still put a placeholder in your calendar. I wanted to also talk about how money actually moves around in DC, right? So the mayor, she takes the first stab, she proposes the budget, and then the council plays, another big role in how our budget is finalized. So council committees, they may move some money within their respective committees. They may decide to transfer money to another committee. As an example, in the fiscal year 21 budget season, Councilmember McDuffie transferred some money from his committee to the Committee on Health for the expansion of the school-based behavioral health program. So that's like one way money can move. The COW, right, Chairman Phil Mendelson, he also can make a lot of decisions to move money around. And then during the first vote, that is really the council's opportunity to raise revenue, which we know is going to be needed this budget season, and honestly, budget seasons here out. In terms of like the second vote, there's not really a lot of opportunities to raise revenue and make a lot of changes. We did see that happen this last budget season, but that was kind of like unprecedented. The normal rule is that by then, things are pretty much set in stone. And then There are also supplemental budgets, which, as you saw on the last slide, the mayor is going to introduce a fiscal year 21 supplemental budget in addition to the proposed fiscal year 22 budget. And supplemental budgets usually happen because maybe there's some overspending that the district needs to address, or the financial picture has changed, and DC must balance its budget. Unlike the federal government, it can't have a deficit. So it must have a balanced budget. We can't spend more than we're collecting through taxes and other sources. So we'll get a supplemental budget. And then I wanted to provide an update on the federal education COVID-19 relief for the district. But before I get into that, I also want to just share like where our district is at financially. So we know that DC is facing about a $500 million revenue shortfall, you know, for the financial plan that we have. That said, you know, the district's financial picture has improved some, namely in fiscal year 20. So the last budget season, our revenue projections actually show that we have a surplus. I believe it's almost about $400 million. So, you know, the mayor and the council could elect to put that money towards our deficit. And then that would leave us with about like a $68 million deficit across our 4-year financial plan. That said, you know, doing that isn't a guarantee, and we could be looking at cuts. But, you know, we at DCFPI, we think that we should use all revenue options possible because people are suffering, especially like low income communities. Black and Latinx people have been hit the hardest by the health and economic challenges of the pandemic. So we think that, you know, strategic use of our surplus money, of our federal relief dollars, and putting revenue raises on the table is a smart way and a more just way to address the pandemic. So that's like on the big picture, but in terms of federal education relief for the district, we got some money in the CARES Act this past summer. I believe it was almost about $40 million. And then in the relief package that was passed in December, DC is expected to get $16 million for early childhood, which is about almost 3 times the amount we got in the CARES Act. And then for K-12 funding, we're looking at $172 million, which is more than 4 times the amount we received via the CARES Act. And how this breaks down for K-12 is that DCPS will likely get about 90 million of that, and the charters will get about 80 million of that, just based off of how, you know, OSSI allocated the money the last time and how they divided the money between the 2 sectors. So I want to stop presenting now. And kind of transition, but I'm also happy to pause and take questions on anything that I just shared.
I'm watching the chat for questions. I don't see any
Okay.
anything in the chat. Can you explain more about it's coming? And I don't see any hands raised. Why DC can't do deficit spending?
Yeah, so this is something that I'm still investigating myself, but most states, right, most states and jurisdictions have it within like their constitutions or their laws that they can't run a deficit. So, and I also believe that this is part of DC's Home Rule Act as well, that places limits on that. But generally speaking, like this is not unique to DC. Most states, they must pass a balanced budget, which is why we need the federal government, honestly, to step in more because it can do more. It has more ability to run up a line of credit, essentially.
And Zinga says, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. Marcia up here.
Hi, Marcia.
Hi, Marcia. I haven't met you yet. I'm glad you're here.
Oh yeah, so I know, I feel like I've met you. I've been in so many spaces with you. I have to mention too, I'm obviously Ward 7 resident. I'm also a PAVE PLE 7 board member. I have a question about these budget engagement sessions. Are they organized around topics? You know, I'm always really interested specifically in education or then youth issues as well. So are they organized that way?
No, they're not organized by topics. So I attended the one in person, before the world shut down. And, there were like round tables, and at each table you had a packet. And the packet covered everything from like transportation, education, et cetera, et cetera. And we kind of went through different exercises. I'm not sure how they're going to do it this year being virtual. I'm not sure how many people are going to show up, but they're not organized by topic. They do kind of run the gamut of the city's budget.
All right, thank you.
Will there be breakout rooms? We're guessing there will be breakout rooms, likely Zoom breakout rooms.
And Laura shared that like the extra, in terms of the exercise, you get like $100. They give you $100 and you decide what % to spend on each thing, AKA prioritizing, right? And I guess the mayor's, collecting this information to see how aligned or not aligned, the public is with what her priorities are. But yeah, it was fun. It was fun. False equivalency. Yeah, raise taxes. I'm with you, Laura. I'm with you.
It's been the same exercise for a few years now, so we're fairly confident that will be the exercise you experience. Also, the deputy mayors tend to come, so this is like a all kind of all hands on deck kind of event. And so each deputy mayor tends to give a overview of their priorities for their particular focus area. So like the deputy mayor for education will likely be there and will tell you kind of what they've prioritized for education. The deputy mayor for public safety will be there. And so they tend to give their overviews first, then they break you into this exercise. And yeah, it is kind of like you kind of make your case for your portion of it. I do want to recognize that Councilmember Gray is with us. And I know he's been through more than enough budgets and is an expert. So he wants to chime in on some of the questions around the budget. He is more than capable.
Hi, Councilmember Gray.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'll see you next Friday too.
And I'm working on making sure I get your name right.
Okay.
I told Ebony Rose that you got on my case pretty bad at the.
Sorry.
Well, you know what? It is what it is, and it's then incumbent upon me to make sure I get the information correct and not come up with the wrong pronunciation of the name. So I appreciate you being a good sport about it, and I have been through many of the budget exercises, to say the least. Having been the mayor, having been the council chair, and now being a council member once again, I go through these exercises on a regular basis, and we've gone through those now where as I think you said it, I think one of you said, I can't remember which one said it now, but you take $100 and divide it up and see what it looks like after that process. And I interestingly enough, I won't spend a lot of time on this, but last one I went to was over at the recreation center, and Deputy Mayor Wayne Turnage was there, and he spoke a good deal about an issue that's hugely important to me, and that of course is healthcare. And we were working then to try to get an improved, broadened, widened healthcare system on the east end of the city. That would be wards 7 and 8. And of course, that includes a quarter of the population in the District of Columbia. And ultimately, what we were able to do, we got all the way down to, I guess, in July when we were making decisions, and we were able to get enough money to to be able to build a brand new hospital, which we are committed to doing. It's the first time we've had a brand new hospital in how many years, decades, on the east end of the city. And an ambulatory care center is going to be built. And so will 2 new urgent care centers. In fact, there'll probably be a 3rd urgent care center as well. So in that process, we were able to make the case for the importance of healthcare. And God knows, since we've been through all that, look at what we've had to go through with the COVID experience. So I'm glad that we've gotten additional healthcare commitments. We got $383.7 million devoted to building a new hospital, a new ambulatory care center, 2 new urgent care centers, and other services that are going to be developed. So to my friend whose name I've also mispronounced, I want her to know that I'm looking forward to the experience of being able to once again make the case for how important these issues are. So I appreciate letting me to piggyback on what you were talking about, Qubillah. So.
No worries. Qubillah, I want to make sure that I think you were going to share something else. And I want to make sure we have some time for more questions in case people have questions. And if anyone wants to lift up any kind of priorities, like they say. So Qubillah, was there anything else? Because I want to be.
Yeah, I want
to get close to right that time.
Yeah, you did. It's okay. Like, I deal with it all the time, and I have grace. I just pick on you a little bit because I see you all the time.
Yep. And it's okay. I just need to get it right and keep it right.
Yeah. So let's talk about what it means for us to not have a committee on education, right? Because I think, in the circles that I've been, like, some people feel like, oh, this was a good move, and other folks are like, no, this was like really, really bad. Where I come in on it, right, I think there are some pretty significant consequences of us not having a committee on education. Number one, we lost a dedicated council champion of education and education-related issues, right? That's not to say that there's no other council member that, doesn't care about, education, but what it does mean is that there's not a council member who, like, their main portfolio involves education. And that has consequences, right? Namely, we don't have any staff in the council whose job it is to be an expert in school finance and the issues, historic and contemporary, that are facing the DC education system, right? Looking at our policies and our laws and understanding their impacts, right? We don't have anyone who that is their main job. And so what that means then is that a lot of things could fall through the cracks. I know that Chairman Mendelson did, co-oversee the committees on education with former Councilman Grasso, but Councilman Grasso was the main person, responsible. He had a committee director, he had other staff that were dedicated to that agency cluster. So that is a huge loss. It's not clear to us that there's been any additional staff added to Cal to help with that, right? And when you put it into perspective, public education makes up 30% of DC's local budget, right? It is one of the largest areas of investment that the city makes, and we don't have a dedicated, committed committee in a pandemic, right? When so many different things are happening and have happened and will continue to happen. And we need a lot of attention given to all the moving pieces. So that is, a challenge. I think another challenge is that, every council member gets a say. Now, in some ways, that could be really great. That could be really awesome, because if they're all on the same page, then it's go, go, go. But it could also be really disastrous if they have fundamentally different beliefs, they have fundamentally different values, different ideas about how we should best address, learning loss or student social, emotional, and mental health, right? Like if they have varying different ideas, there could just be a lot of debate. And at a time where we need very decisive decision-making, it would have been really great for us to have a committee on education. So that is, one of the challenges that, I think we're facing. I think also another challenge, right, is because other council members, they do have main portfolios, we could see limited participation in some of the committee on education or education hearings, education related hearings. So that means that the chairman himself may be the only person we get to talk to, or again, we're just not seeing as much engagement from other council members, and not because they don't care, but because they have many other things on their plate that they are tasked with doing. And then in terms of community responsiveness, right? The ability of the chairman and his staff to adequately respond to the families of the 100 public school children in the district. I'm not really seeing how that's gonna happen smoothly, because they are already so overwhelmed with all of their other responsibilities. So I'll stop there. Ebony Rose, do you mind if I read the questions or respond to the questions?
Yeah, I would say please respond to the question, and then I have a question.
Okay. Yeah, so will the CAL hire staff who will specialize in education? That's a great question, Marcia. To my knowledge, there's been no additional staff hired in the past. I've worked closely with Lakeisha. I imagine she'll continue to focus on education, but again, I don't think that's her only issue area. So it'll just be a challenge, because there's also a learning curve, right? There's a lot of things that Phil's staff is going to have to learn about to really engage with the issues facing the public education system, because there is no committee director specializing in that to have those conversations with. And then your second question about, was this decision made because junior members usually do not chair committees? I'm sure that was part of it, right? And thinking about who could or who wanted to take over the committee on education. But from my understanding, again, I'm newer to DC, I think there's, I will maybe let other people chime in there because I think there was some tensions even with the sort of joint oversight, but I don't know enough to say definitively, and I don't want to get tongue tied, so I'll stop there with that response.
If I can reflect back for a second, just to add to what you're saying, I was the chair of the council at one point before I became the mayor. And I actually, when Fenty was the mayor, and I actually, I took education into the committee of the whole at that point. And one of the reasons I did that is because I knew there was going to be such an enormous engagement around education that I thought this would be an opportunity for all the members to be involved with helping to make the decisions at that point. The decisions were being made around whether the mayor would have authority over managing, responding to education or not. And when I did that, it was an opportunity to give every one of the council members who was involved at that point a chance to be able to weigh in on whether the mayor should have that kind of role and authority in making education decisions. And in one sense, I'm glad that we did, because He gave every council member a chance to be able to weigh in on whether they thought we ought to go in that direction or not. And so I kept it for the 4 years that I was chairman of the council, and then turned it back over to an education committee thereafter. That was the general sentiment for the members at that stage. It resulted in council members figuring out what more, they focused more on what it meant to be a council member than in the broader sense, rather than just a council member with a specific area of responsibility. And it's interesting to see, it'll be interesting to see, because I'm sure that folks will weigh in whether they think this approach, you know, is going to benefit our children, will it benefit our teachers, our families, or will we backslide in terms of, what we will be doing with education. So it'll be interesting to revisit that history.
Yeah, I think so. Ebony Rose, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, building on what Councilmember Gray was saying, like it is the chairman's prerogative and responsibility to assign committees. So Mendelsohn does have a, let's call it a precedent that he has set for under his leadership on the council, that he only assigns committee leadership to experienced members. And I say experienced because when the our Councilmember Gray returned, he did get a committee. So it's not necessarily like your first, new member. So that's the thing. But it's also a negotiation that the members do amongst themselves around like their priorities and what they want to focus on. So it's a little bit of both, to Laura's point in the chat. I will say which actually leads to part of my question for you, Qubillah. Do you have any advice, given that a lot of people are used to lobbying a committee? So with it being in the committee of the whole, what advice would you have for people around like engaging and putting their education issues on council members' radars?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think to the extent that you can, like requesting to meet with your council members and like all council members, to be honest, to let them know, hey, like this is an issue that's important to us. I mean, a lot of the new council members that have joined, like I've been in some meetings with them and they all have like very serious questions and concerns about what we're going to do with public education. So I think knowing who your allies are and knowing who is gonna kind of go to bat, right? And gonna like not just let things happen, I think is a good step. And there's like tons of coalitions out here who are able to sort of make those meeting requests and whatnot. So like you could consider doing it that way, right? To take off some of that pressure if you don't have the time, but definitely showing up and communicating with all council members, I think is super important. Obviously, I think meeting with the chair himself and his staff, getting in front of them is super important. I mean, he's made the time for, some of the other coalition spaces that I've been in. So like, I think, he's concerned. And so let's make sure that, what we're concerned about becomes his concerns. And so I want to be able to wrap up my little portion. So I'll just share sort of what we're thinking, what we want to prioritize, what DCFPI is sort of thinking about for, the fiscal year 22 budget. As I opened up with, we're deeply concerned about the major mental health crisis facing our children. But I'd argue we have to even expand that, right, to educators, to staff, to families. And so, we do want to see the school-based mental health program expanded. We want to see, the community-based behavioral health services. We want to see their budget restored as well. We want to see the digital divide be aggressively attacked by the district, right? Like, some kids are still gonna be learning virtually and some not. And so like, we have to make sure that no matter where the child is learning, they have what they need. That teachers have what they need, right? Like teachers are running their personal devices in the ground, and that's unacceptable, right? So we need to make sure they have what they need, and there's some digital literacy needs as well. You know, out of school time, you know, many of them are still functioning virtually. Some of them are like beginning to transition to in-person learning. And we know that those can be safe spaces for students to get like academic help, social emotional help, lots of different things, and important spaces for families to connect after being so isolated. I think a really big thing is that for the federal money that the district is receiving, we need targeted funding, right? Like the UPSFF, I know it's our main tool, but it very much functions as a tool of equality. And right now we are dealing with massive inequality. We were dealing with that before, right? And so for our students who we know are struggling academically, socially, emotionally, whatever the case may be, the district needs to be really intentional about how it's targeting additional resources. That's a hill that I'm willing to die on. So you'll hear me say that in my testimony and on Twitter, if you follow me, like that's just, it's so important that we really try to get that right, because so much was wrong, honestly, before the pandemic. So I'll end on that note. Yeah, thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for joining us, Qubillah. I want to lift up something in the chat that Lakeisha shared. Lakeisha works in the Deputy Mayor for Education's office. She says that her understanding is that the committee of the whole is planning to hold regular, possibly monthly hearings on various education topics to ensure issues are not being overlooked. Letting them know what issues you want to hear about in those hearings is a good place to engage. So that is helpful information. I know some people are on the phone and don't see the chats. I want to make sure I share that out.
Can I add one other thing, Ebony?
Yes, sir.
The reason I raise this is because we should not forget that one of the newest members of the council is Christina Henderson. And Christina, of course, was she was a staffer in Councilmember Grasso's office and worked on education. So that she brings a great deal of expertise to the issue, and she brings an enormous amount of commitment as well to making sure that we continue to do the best job we can to get education right in the city. In fact, I asked her if she was interested in serving on the health committee. And the reason why I did that is because when I came back to the council, Councilmember Grasso and I worked very closely together around the mental health issues affecting our children in the schools. And we worked hard to put together a document that led to us then developing a real school-based mental health plan for our kids. So I simply say this, that you have Christina Henderson, frankly, and myself too. I like to think of myself as somebody who deeply is committed to education. But with Christina Henderson, you got somebody who is now a council member, at-large council member, and she was a staffer on the education committee working with Councilmember Grasso. And I'm sure that she will want to hear fully from people in the city who care about education because she's done this before.
Yeah, that's a great point. And sorry, I have a whining dog working from home. So that's a great point. Christina has definitely already shown some leadership around this issue. It is helpful to pay attention to council members. And remember that at-large council members are your council members too, because they do represent the whole city. I want to give a last call for any questions for Qubillah, because it is 7:25. We do wrap this meeting up roughly 8:15. Last call for any questions. while I'm waiting on the last call for any questions, I want to note that typically we also do send and participate in coalitions that talk about budget priorities. I want to invite people either to start to put in the chat things that they think are really important to be funded. We'll also do just some more engagement around budget priorities. If there are things that come to mind immediately, share them with us now. But we'll also just be doing some outreach around that. So Qubillah, I'm not seeing any more questions.
Ebony, I have
Vanola, yes.
Yeah, I guess it's for either Qubillah or council member or both, either one or both. And it's kind of like a philosophical question. I guess I heard, about the concern around the brain drain about education on the council, but we have another elected body that focuses exclusively on education. And I know there's mayoral control and all of that, which changed the structure of the Board of Education. But I'm just wondering, I guess from the council member's vantage point, do you see any type of benefit in working along with the Board of Education on education issues so that you have a broad spectrum of views to attack the issues and the problems that we face, rather than only the council dealing with them? Am I kind of making sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll weigh in, briefly and quickly, but I do. I look forward to working with Ebony Rose. She has such grounding in education, and she's devoted so much of her time, her attention, and her talents to working in education. It would be foolish of me not to work with her in the role that she's in now. She will bring expertise, coming from the advocacy role that she's assumed in the recent years. She will bring that to bear, I think, on how she carries out her role as a board member. And I think it would just be foolish not to do that. I've also seen with other council members, I have seen them develop strong relationships and interactions with the board members, people who are elected board members, and respect the expertise that they bring. So I just think it would be foolish of a council member not to take advantage of the expertise that the board members are bringing, and it will be a lost opportunity, it seems to me. So I've urged my colleagues to do just that, and will continue to do exactly the same thing.
I don't have anything additional to add.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Vanola. I see people are starting to put some priorities in the chat. I'm going to lift up a couple questions and we'll transition to Councilmember Gray. Qubillah, thank you. As always super informative, always super helpful. We will share out the presentation to our email list. So if you don't get our emails, please also put your email in the chat so we can email you and share out the presentation because there's a lot of links and resources there. And of course, Qubillah, you are welcome to stay with us for the rest of the meeting.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay.
Okay, so Councilmember Greg has a question. Greg. Councilmember Gray, do you and perhaps other council members believe that the district has reached a point where council might need to legislatively revisit the whole concept of mayoral control?
Well, I hear that frequently. It's raised in many meetings that I go to, and I think it's worth a discussion. I'm not sure that anybody, even in the meetings I've been, that somebody has made a powerful case for returning to the policymaking role of the Board of Education. I just think that if this discussion continues, and it probably should continue, it would just be well worth making sure to visit the period when there was a policymaking Board of Education. I came on the council when this whole issue started, and it was not a pleasant experience for many people because they had wearied, if you will, of an elected Board of Education at that point. So in order to be able to have a fair discussion of it, it's going to have to be somebody who's willing to do the research and look back at those days when we had a policy-making Board of Education. There were many who perceived it, and I'm not saying this is absolutely correct because it's not necessarily correct, but there were those who perceived the Board of Education as simply a stepping stone to go to the next elected opportunity that existed in the city. Maybe that's not fair, maybe it is. But whenever this is discussed, if there is a discussion of it, it ought to be done in the context of trying to be absolutely fair in terms of what benefits we've derived from this, and what are the problems that we experienced that we have tried to overcome. With the mayor being the policy-making entity. There are a lot of states, if you will, or jurisdictions where they have moved in the direction, or tried to move in the direction of having the elected CEO, if you will, be the policymaker for education as well. I think it's worthy of discussion, and it should be discussed in light of all the other factors that would weigh in to what went into the decision in the first place.
Greg, thanks for that question. I will also share, so people know, the State Board of Education, of course, has our public meetings. We had our working session last night. For people who are familiar with like how ANCs are organized, and even the council, like they have their organizational meetings, we do have to vote on what our committee structure will be. We have proposed actually assembling an ad hoc committee to actually research this issue and engage the public around it. As of right now, it is proposed that I chair that committee. We haven't voted on that. We will vote on that at our, what's this now, February? At our February meeting. But we will totally be looking at both like, to Councilmember Gray's point, like what has been, like whatever our structure's been, but also things like other cities, because mayoral control is not one size fits all. And we are kind of on the most extreme version of that spectrum. So, and we want to make sure that someone is having that conversation with the public. We know that there are council members like Councilmember Gray and others who said like, it should be a conversation. So we actually need to make it one, because that's a big decision. I see a question for Kareem, from Kareem. What is the general consensus of the current BOE on mayoral control? We don't have a consensus. I think the consensus is that we've heard people raise this as an issue, especially given the not having an education committee, just a lot of the interactions people have had around COVID, and actually just understanding. I don't think people actually understood that we had mayoral control before. I think it's become real in a different way. And so we've heard that a lot. And I think it's time for us to just, again, like have the conversation, help educate people around the current landscape, and think about what a future landscape could be. It doesn't necessarily mean a return to what was, but we've changed a lot as a city, and we're thinking about like, just like everybody else is the future of the city. I'm going to go to the chat. I see Ron Thompson has asked, I'd appreciate Councilmember Gray's thoughts on issues around at-risk funding and school level budget shortfalls that seem to crop up every year, mostly in Ward 7 and 8 schools. Is there a point to continually raising the UPSFF if it seems some schools are always having to cut essential staff, or if at-risk funding isn't going to supplement school budgets.
Can also help there too.
It should supplement. It should supplement. That's what it's for, to supplement. And I think the advocacy that I've seen weighed in on before now is hugely important to being able to continue to make the case for how the funding has been used in the past and how it should be used. I mean, we know what the theory is. We know what it has said as well. And we know that there are times when it has not been used in an equitable way, so that the children who are at risk really get the benefit of the additional dollars. And I think that that's certainly one of the roles that the Board of Education can play as well, and that is being able to weigh in on how at-risk funding is or is not being used in the District of Columbia. And we know that there have been periods, there have been times when those dollars have not been used in what anybody would consider to be a fair and equitable fashion. So I think continuing to have that discussion is hugely valuable, hugely important, and it may push, it may push the conversation in a direction so that those dollars are used in a more fair and more equitable fashion.
Ebony Rose, can I tag on to that real quick? Thank you, Councilmember, for talking about the importance of the advocacy around this. Many of you, probably heard of the auditor's report, right? That showed within DCPS sort of the chronic supplantation or supplanting of at-risk dollars, and sort of what issues that poses for those particular students or school communities. I was part of the 2020 UPSFF working group. And that report that we did is now public. I believe it was just shared with the council. We were told that today. And within that report, one of the things that we recommended based off of like the research that was presented to us was that we should also be looking at providing additional funding to students that have like 2 or more at-risk characteristic traits. We've also, had this conversation about like, how do we change the way we talk about these students, right? Because like at risk of what and like who made them that? So like, how do we use more asset-based language, right? So we can truly meet the needs of these students. And, on the accountability side, right, we had this school financial transparency law. The district is supposed to come up with common financial reporting metrics by this spring. DCPS and the charter LEAs will have to start reporting that way in 2023, and in 2024, those sort of reports become public, right? So like we're still ways out before we're seeing any sort of transparency around how at-risk money is being spent, like between sectors, right, within sectors. And so I think advocates, yes, play a role, but I also think council, there needs to be some accountability. I don't even know how you enforce it, right? Because I know that this is something that came up with former Councilmember Grasso and Chairman Phil Mendelson. It's like, well, what do? We can't take, you want us to take the money away? It's like, no, we don't want that. But I do think that we need champions on the inside of the council to really figure out like, okay, what is going on? And I'm just deeply concerned with how we're doing things. And then the last thing I add is, I do think there's a disconnection between the UPSFF and then the comprehensive staffing model that DCPS uses to allocate funding. So it's thinking about how do we get all of these, agencies or power players at the table so that the decisions we're making on the left side match up with what we're doing on the right. And I'll end there.
Awesome. I'm going to read a couple more questions from the chat. I'm also going to make sure that I stop questions at a certain point so that I will do a last call because I want to make sure that people get updates on the vaccine rollout and hearings that have happened because that's been something we've heard a lot about. And I know the council member made that opportunity available for people to come testify and lift their voices up, which is one of the reasons he's here. So I'm gonna do a last call for questions in the chat because it's 7:40. I'm gonna go through the questions that we have, and then I wanna make sure he has some time to give an update about that in particular. So the next question in the chat is from Kareem. Where are we in terms of Councilmember Gray's proposal to move some of the Ward 3 PTA's funds to other parts of the city?
That was my proposal.
I thought that was Grosso's, but
My apologies. I thought that was your work, but I know at one point there was some conversation about having portions of the Ward 3 PT. Well, it didn't specify Ward 3, but we all know that's where the very rich PTAs are, about committing portions of their funds over a certain cap to the budget of the school, so that school budget funds could move to other parts of the city that needed the money from the city. Are we anywhere close to moving past this double funding that the Ward 3 PTAs are able to do?
I don't know of any proposal that's on the table at present, and certainly it's worthy of continuing discussion. It frankly creates an environment within which you don't just have the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. That's maybe not the best way to analogize the situation, but it is close to that, because what we see is there are certain households that have the ability to add to the expenditures within their school. And then you have so many schools on the east end of the city, where Ward 7 and Ward 8 are located, where those resources are just not available in at the same level as those schools on the other side of the city. And that's probably going to continue to be an argument. And I see nothing wrong with the conversation, nothing wrong with the debate. And it may be that there are some PTAs who will step up and say, you know what, why don't we take some of our dollars and move those over to Ward 7, move them over to Ward 8 and School X, so that they can have more resources available to them. I think that would be a very healthy conversation. I have no idea, of course, where that would wind up, but it would be a very healthy conversation to have, in my opinion.
Councilmember Gray, you should take credit for your work. It was you co-sponsored the bill with Councilmember Grosso in 2019.
Yeah. Well,
okay. I'm glad to know that I wasn't crazy. I'm not going. I might still be crazy, but it wasn't because of that.
Yeah. And I don't want to take credit from Councilmember Grosso, because he and I worked very well together on education, on mental health, and school-based mental health issues. And he was on the health committee as well. So I worked very closely with him, and I'm sorry he's gone. I mean, I'm glad Christina is here, because she's going to make an enormous contribution, but I worked very well with Councilmember Grosso, and we'll look forward to him where he is now, being able to continue to make contributions to how we do the business of education for our children and their families in the District of Columbia.
All right. Well, sounds like some credit is due. Carla asked Councilmember Gray, is it possible to give Aussie Enforcement Authority real teeth, she says, over LEA short of getting rid of mayoral control?
I think so. Anything is possible if it depends on how the council would choose to go at the issue. I have raised the question, even thought about doing legislation. I don't know, what the sentiments will be, but around the possibility of having the State Board of Education have the state, the chair, if you will, have the state chair, if you will, appointed, have that function be configured differently than what it is now, so that the State Board of Education chair, for example, would be somebody who has more authority than exists now. And I'd love to hear some of that debate discussed among the Board of Education around whether that makes sense or not, to look at doing it a little differently than what we do now.
Awesome. That is actually what we're looking at. Like, what are the possibilities? No decisions have been made. It's not even a committee
Right.
yet. We haven't even voted, but it is on the table. So weigh in. Like totally send. I'll put my state board email in the chat because I do believe we should collect information before we vote on things. So please send me emails and I will forward them to my colleagues in case they're on the fence. Ron, I want to lift up his comment. Says, as a product of DCPS from the beginning of mayoral control, I do think it's important to not look solely at the old board era. Also, the CAP Center for American Progress article, Marla shared it in the chat, mentioned strategic allocation of resources. And here we are having a conversation about the misallocation of resources within DCPS. Vanola and Rhonda are having a conversation about possibly a referendum to address mayoral control. Qubillah. Also, if folks want to get updates from DCFPI, she's put that information in the chat. Laura asked, why just the chair?
So it was just being mentioned. It's mentioned that the State Board of Education chair would be the one with more authority.
Oh, okay.
Meaning like basically everything boils down to one election and we have to duke it out versus like the whole board having more authority.
And you could, that could be an excellent part of the discussion that would be held. I don't see anything wrong with putting those things on the table and then just duke it out, you know, in terms of where people come down on it, and we go from there.
Sorry, dogs are dogs. They don't care about what's in the council meetings. Marla notes, OSSI should report to, in her opinion, should report to the State Board of Education, and all LEAs should be regulated by OSSI. I did do my last call for questions. I don't see any more questions. I'm gonna give it a moment for a couple more. I'm gonna give it a moment. We're at 7:48, but I also want to make sure the council member has a chance to just give us an update on like the hearing, the vaccine hearing, and some of the changes that have been made as far as the, you know, who's in line and those types of things, because that's all in your health committee. So I'll let you start and we'll see if anything else rolls in.
You want me to go ahead, Evelyn?
Yes, please.
And I'll try to stay with my notes because this will keep me from going on for hours. I won't want to do that. Nobody wants me to do that. I do think that we certainly recognize that we're now approaching the 1 year mark of battling COVID-19 here in our city and really across the nation. And I think while we're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel, the single biggest problem right now, in my opinion anyway, is just the inadequacy of the supply of vaccine that's available, especially trying to meet the demand that people have for being able to get the vaccine. I've worked very hard to try to get people to the vaccine. We've had debate after debate after debate after debate about how we get people to be able to have access to the vaccine. Generally speaking, I think the executive branch, the executive, has done a pretty good job. And if we look at the statistics, I think you will see that we probably weigh in rather favorably in comparison to other states. I look at Virginia, I look at Maryland, which is of course our nearby neighbors. And we've had to make some corrections and adjustments along the way. And we've been able to do those. We've done that in a variety of ways. In fact, the council has, every council member participates in a once a week call around what's happening with the fight against this virus every Wednesday for an hour. We're on the phone having discussions about how we continue to go with this. Many of you probably know, I'm sure you know, that the Committee on Health had a 2-day public oversight roundtable on the vaccination process just last Friday, be a week tomorrow. And during the testimony last week, the number one issue discussed by public witnesses was the need to adjust the vaccinate.dc.gov, well, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Portal to establish a registry in lieu of the current, what has been the current weekly enrollment process, which essentially bifurcates the enrollment and appointment processes. And the appointment had gotten a bit difficult because there were questions that were being raised around the equity, the fairness of how that's being done. And we've made some adjustments, some additional adjustments along the way. The weekly scramble to access scarce appointment slots for COVID-19 vaccinations has caused an enormous amount of stress and frustration, especially for a lot of our seniors in the District of Columbia. The seniors were supposed to be able to have priority in terms of people who were 65 and over would get priority in terms of being able to get the appointments. But that has not proven to be the case, because we've seen just an enormous amount of frustration, an enormous amount of stress associated with that. A little over a week ago, my colleagues and I penned a letter that went to Deputy Mayor Wayne Turnage. The people who signed on to that were Charles Allen, Breanne Nadeau, Christina Henderson, Anita Bonds, Robert White, Councilmember Pinto, and Councilmember Lewis George, who all weighed in on a letter that we sent forward. We requested in that letter that the vaccinate.dc.gov portal be redesigned to allow district residents to complete their registration for a vaccination appointment and have their application saved through the portal so that they only need to complete the application process just once, which made infinite sense to me. In fact, we were the ones who were the moving forces behind getting that done. And what this would do, of course, is to allow seniors and other residents, district residents, to know that they will be vaccinated on a date certain and when it is their turn, which would be, I think, a lot more organized and a lot more fair than otherwise would be the case. This is a more organized, in my opinion anyway, more organized approach. And it allows the district government, allows the nonprofits, it allows district leaders, and allows volunteers to help seniors who have limited access to technology, which is a huge issue for a number of our folks who are seniors and people too with disabilities, not from an intellectual perspective, but just from the facility of dealing with the technology itself. It would allow them to enroll in a way that's not compressed into what is proven to be a half-hour time frame. When the district receives its supply of the vaccine, which has never been what we think it should be, or what frankly it ought to be, the district could then notify everybody who's on the registry. We could do it by phone, we could do it by text, do it by email, or some form of fashion that they are now eligible to sign up for an appointment within the next 24-hour window. It would allow the government to prioritize vaccination appointment slots and ensure that they are being distributed in the fairest and most equitable fashion that takes consideration the age of the person, any pre-existing conditions that they may be dealing with, and the impact of the COVID-19 on the resident's zip code in which they may reside. It would provide, in my opinion, and opinion of those who signed on to the letter, a much more organized process than we had seen previously. Actually, Deputy Mayor Turnage had acknowledged that the district was moving in that direction. For those who don't know, we not only had the roundtable last Friday, but this last Monday, we brought in the entirety of the government's apparatuses working on this. We had the deputy mayor, we had Thomas Ashton, and we had deputy city administrator who's working on these issues as well. And they engaged in a very thorough discussion about where we were with this. What Wayne Turner said was that we're about 2 to 3 weeks before this new registry system is going to be available, which means that we got another week, a week and a half before it's going to be done. And once it's operational, I think anyway, it's going to reduce the anxiety and the frustration that people are experiencing at this point. Also, in the letter that we sent forward, my colleagues and I also urged the executive, the mayor in this instance, to allow childcare workers to be eligible to receive vaccinations at the same time as DCPS and the public school charter schools would receive them, since they're teaching our kids as well. So it would make them eligible to be vaccinated now. And that was actually approved by the mayor. She approved that, and they went forward with that as well. Many of you all will recall that the District of Columbia actually pressed the child care services, child care programs to reopen in November of 20, just a matter of months ago. And the vast majority of those providers did so. They put their staff on the front line in the battle against this pandemic, so that infants and toddlers would be focused on as a top priority as we go forward with this. They would be able to return, and some of us believe this. For those who know me, I've spent a lot of time, a lot of my energy focusing on early childhood education, and fully believe that the more we can focus on early childhood education, the more benefits we will have to our very youngest children. Through legislation like the Birth to Three for All DC Amendment Act of 2018, which was a bill that I thought was hugely important to be able to augment what we get done with pre-K 3 and pre-K 4, was absolutely necessary, because this would again emphasize the work of the importance of educating our very youngest minds in our child care services, and would again underscore the importance of being able to support, what we're trying to do with pre-K 3 through pre-K 12, which we know is a hugely important issue as well. we received strong support in favor of the position that we took in public testimony at the public roundtable. And I do want to at least, be fair and underscore the importance of the executive branch stepping up in the aftermath of the hearing and then moving forward to register child care workers to be able to receive the vaccination. Other issues that were raised in the public testimony and that I asked questions to the executive branch included prioritizing people ages 16 to 64 with very serious medical challenges or disabilities. Secondly, ensuring that if we continue to prioritize vaccinations to at-risk workers, we wanted Maryland and Virginia to contribute vaccine supplies for residents of their states who literally are working in the District of Columbia, and we believe should make a contribution to us being able to ensure that these folks are taken care of. And then we had lots of testimony and statements around what do we do about our sanitation workers? There was strong testimony from sanitation workers at the hearing that we had last Friday. And I don't know where we are with that, but I do think that that's an important thing to be able to continue to pay attention to. The effort to vaccinate our people in the District of Columbia, as well as everywhere, really is probably the historic challenge. And I look forward to working with my colleagues on the council and to DC residents to ensure that people do get vaccinated in the most effective and equitable manner possible. In-person education is a more effective, I think, is a more effective and approach, but obviously has to be done in a safe manner and in a way that is transparent and is as safe as we possibly can engage people. I think it will regain the trust of most stakeholders, in particular, our students, our families, and teachers, so many of whom I believe, there have been varying opinions, but we've seen so many people too who would like to see their kids back in school. We're going to have to measure at some point what has been the learning loss of our students through learning that's taken place transparent through things like Zoom, like we're engaged in now. I attended a series of roundtables concerning the state of education, public education, during this global health pandemic, and the state of education and the impact on learning and reopening schools and the return to in-person classroom learning. And there's just mixed reviews on that. And some of you are undoubtedly aware of that yourselves. I do want to give a huge level of credit to our State Board of Education representative, Ebony Rose Thompson, who I was delighted to be able to swear in for her term on the Board of Education. And also I want to underscore the importance of the other residents who spoke at the roundtable. In my questions and statements at the roundtable last Friday, and then the conversation that we had this past Monday, I emphasized the need, which is not easily measured, for adequate information, for trust, and for buy-in from the community in order to be able to get through this continuing challenge that we have. We've had care classrooms, which, I'm not sure how people feel about those. In some instances, they are, there have been a variety of opinions expressed. We still have, of course, in-person learning taking place now. Some of it back in our schools, and some of it affecting all of our grades in our schools. The frequency with which we should be continuing to do that will remain to be determined. The case during this pandemic has been that there are continuing equity concerns, you know, where people live, people's race, people's, the other factors that we deal with every day. And we will continue to debate those as to whether we are treating our kids fairly and their families fairly enough as well. So I would ask that you all, and the Health Committee is going to continue to focus on this. I would ask that you all report to Ebony Rose, because she and I talk fairly frequently. And I would ask you to continue to report to her and report to our office what the experiences are that you are having. We've got many people now who've had their first dose. I think I get my second one tomorrow. And we also now are approaching, in addition to Pfizer and the other approach that we're taking, there is now another vaccine that's being looked at that may wind up requiring only one dose. Who knows at this stage? We're going to continue to work to try to get the federal government to bring more doses of the vaccine into the city. From a financial or vaccine perspective, we are absolutely convinced that we have not been treated fairly in the District of Columbia. We certainly weren't treated fairly when the initial allocations of dollars were awarded. We were treated like a territory rather than the state that we are, in my opinion. So I'm going to continue to monitor the work that we're doing, and I'm going to continue to, as the Health Committee Chair, continue to try to focus on those things that will make a difference to the folks who are within the purview of the Health Committee, which of course would include everybody in Ward 7 and those who live elsewhere in the city as well, to try to create the most fair process we possibly can. So I probably went further than I should have, Ebony Rose, and I apologize for that because our time was running short. But I'm delighted to have been here tonight and just ask you all to continue to work as closely with me as you possibly can to turn healthcare into a benefit to the people on the eastern end of the city who live in Ward 7, live in Ward 8. And just so you all know, we have the selection of an architect to be able to design the new hospital for this area of the city. Also, the ambulatory care facility is going to be built, and there will be 2 urgent care centers, maybe 3, that will be located in Ward. There's at least 2, one to be located in 7, one to be located in 8, and there's going to be a 3rd as well. So we've got a lot of resources that are being devoted to healthcare at this stage to be able to bring the adequacy of healthcare to the doorsteps of people who live, especially in Wards 7 and 8 of the city. So thank you, Ebony Rose, for giving me a chance to make somewhat of a presentation tonight and to participate in the education discussion up to this point.
Thank you. I do have, I think 3 questions. We are at 8:10. We tend to close at 8:15.
Okay. So in other words, make it brief, huh?
So, but I want to make sure that so I'm going to read the 3 questions. Before I do, I'm also just going to read, I have 2 announcements in the chat. Announcements first. So one is that Stokes has a happy announcement. their Boy Scout troop just earned their first at East End, just earned their first merit badges. So congrats to them. Natalie added in the chat that Global Citizens Public Charter School, which will be the first dual language immersion elementary school offering Mandarin and Spanish, east of the river, will be opening in fall of 2021 for children pre-K3 and pre-K4. They're having a virtual open house this Saturday, the 6th at 11 a.m. The link is in the chat. Questions? So I'm gonna read them off. I'm gonna let you answer, and then we are going to adjourn. Okay, so the first question I see came from Ron. So, which is he says it might not be a quick question. Does Councilmember Gray have any thoughts on DCPS bringing food preparation in-house as recommended by the DC auditor?
That is not an easy question. And, you know, and it gets caught up in this whole discussion about COVID and, you know, how we view, what impact we view that having on having in-house food preparation. The, you know, the feedback that we got on food preparation previously was not positive. I would like to look at, that. That's not an answer. It is an answer and it is not an answer. I would like to look as thoroughly at that as possible. I would like to have as much input on the factors that we should consider in making that decision as possible. And I would like to have as much input from you, Ebony Rose, and those who work with you around whether that is something that we should be seriously considering or not. So, Ron, I appreciate the question, but I hope that you will give us sufficient space and sufficient time in order to make a thorough, thoughtful decision about whether we do that or not.
Awesome. Kareem notes that schools with in-house food prep are generally more likely to meet healthy food goals. Next question, is there a way to move all school employees up the list for One Medical to reassure employees so that we can get more classrooms open? Oh, and I'm sorry, Neela, I missed your question, but I'll read it next.
The question was, is there a way to move all DCPS employees?
Well, not specifically DCPS, school employees. So this is coming
school.
from
That would include charters as well?
I believe so. So I believe as of right now, DC charters, independent schools, and child care workers all have to sign up through that One Medical portal.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's no allocations around that. Like, I think it's just you log in at 9 o'clock. Marla made a similar comment about it, and kind of first come, first serve. And so Kareem is wondering, is there a way that we can move people up that list or do something so that more classrooms can open?
Yeah, that's a part of the discussion we had last Friday at the roundtable, and that we had with, you know, that we had with the executive branch this past Monday also. What I'd like to do is I'd like to talk to Deputy Mayor Turnage because he has a key role in how these decisions are being made. And I wish he could have come tonight. I would have had him come along and to be able to explain what are the factors that they're looking at to make these kinds of decisions that would allow us to more quickly allocate the vaccine. Maybe we'll be forced and we'll get, you know, more vaccine coming to us more quickly, and we'll be able to make those decisions more easily than we otherwise would. But based on the current factors that we have at present, I would like to talk with him and his colleagues to follow up on the letter and the hearing that we had, the interaction we had with him and his colleagues at the roundtable this past Monday. So, Ebony Rose, can I get back to you on that once we get some feedback from him?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
I think I have two more. Councilmember Gray, is there any way in which the council can provide support for families that are anxious for their children to return to school, but are part of LEAs that are not offering slots for in-person learning? Working parents of young children are really struggling with having to pay for childcare a year into the pandemic.
Yeah, childcare has been a huge issue. I don't doubt that at all. In fact, we know it has been. And what specifically is the question that you want me to get back to you all on with some feedback?
I think she's asking, is there any options for support? So like DC, we've had a lot of conversation around DCPS reopening. It seems to be a little more opaque around which other LEAs are open and how many seats they're offering. Like we don't have a great picture for that. So I'm assuming that Neela is asking because she is not a DCPS parent and she is unsure what supports are available to her. And I'm guessing that's going to vary depending on which charter her students attend.
Yeah, I think.
Can I just briefly elucidate the question?
I would prefer you not because it's 8:15. But we can totally connect you all to follow up.
Yeah, please connect me with who posed the question so that we can get a really informed answer, because it deserves an informed answer. Because you were asking about support for parents also, I think was a part of the question. I'd like to get the full flavor of what the question is so that we can make sure to come back with a full answer that would properly, in an informed way, address the questions being raised.
All right, thank you. And we will make sure to do that.
Okay.
Vanola's, which is the last question. I marked it as the last question, so I would know. Do council members receive information about the breakouts of outbreaks of COVID-19 in the schools that have opened just today? She says she's heard of 2 and wonders whether the community should know about them.
Well, we don't receive it on a routine basis. No, the answer is no to the question. It's a fair question, but I can't say, in any informed way that information that we've gotten is comprehensive in identifying the number of cases that have been identified, and even if it was just identifying the cases, who is it that has shown up as testing positive, who has the virus. So no, we don't routinely receive that information, and I don't think we will, to be honest with you. That's probably private information, it's getting into people's health issues, which I don't think will be well received, to be honest with you. I will raise that question with my colleagues, because we'll be getting together again the first part of next week to talk about questions that have been raised. I think that is an excellent question, but I do think I know what the answer is at this point.
All right, that was the last question because I marked it. I will say that we do kind of download the chat and export it. So if there are other questions, please throw them in the chat. We'll follow up. Neela, I don't know if I have your email. So if you could add that, that'd be great, and we'll get you connected. I want to thank everybody for just attending this evening. I know some of you probably have been on Zoom or Teams or some version of some platform since early this morning. And so we definitely appreciate you all logging in and joining us. Thank you to Councilmember Gray. Thank you to Qubillah, who may have left us by now. But stay well and stay safe.
Still here.
Oh, still here. Thanks, Qubillah. With that, I'm jealous. So with that, it is 8:20. That's not too bad. We are adjourned. We will see you next month, and we will make sure to upload the recording of this meeting to YouTube. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ebony Rose, and I'll look forward to getting those questions from you as soon as you can, so that we can try to get the best possible answers such as they have answers, back to you, and you can back to your group.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Okay. Mhm.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.